In contrast to the earthy and beautiful Girl with a Parrot by Gustave Courbet, consider the porcelain silhouette in Alexandre Cabanel 1875 painting, The Birth of Venus. Cabanel's first version of The Birth of Venus, Musée d'Orsay, Paris, caused a sensation at the Salon of 1863, which was dubbed the Salon of Venus because of the number of seductive nudes on display. The Salon painting was acquired by Napoleon III for his personal collection. In 1875, New York resident John Wolfe commissioned Cabanel for the present, slightly smaller copy. The composition embodies the ideals of academic art: mythological subject matter, graceful modeling, a silky style of writing, and a polished form. This style has always been popular with collectors, although it was challenged by artists who sought a more personal interpretation of the truth of nature, such as Courbet. During the whole 19th century, we are talking and will continue to talk about revolutionary innovations in art. The main initiators of violations of the classical school were mainly representatives of France, as this country set and cultivated revolutions, political, social, and as a consequence, broke the foundations of art. Such a revolutionary was a calm, educated, and very well-mannered representative of the bourgeoisie, Édouard Manet. An artist who began life, not refined ideas about it. It is with him it is customary to count down a new era in art. This era is called modern art and lasts until today. Our collection does not include some of the artist's most scandalous works, such as Breakfast on the Grass and Olympia. There are some on display right now, but they will soon return to their native France. Let's run through the Met's collection. Recall that photography was gaining popularity at this time, and artists were beginning to use it extensively. What separates a bad photographer from a professional? I think each of us has been criticized for screwing up the horizon and cropping part of the composition. It was these mistakes that led Manet to the so-called cropping style. Manet breaks down composition, and what is composition in the classical understanding of fine art? There are many notions, but if we do not reason with abstruse terms, it is the action of a scene from the play, wherein each episode unfolds a complete plot. All the characters are subordinated to a single goal, a single impulse and work on the theme of the image. The visual center is accentuated in the picture. It can be either semantic or geometric. Mandatory balancing of unbalanced parts. Proportionality, harmonization of relations of magnitudes, and the use of the golden ratio. Identification of connecting elements, strong and weak lobes of the image field, verticals and horizontals, major and minor diagonals. One of my favorite paintings by Édouard Manet is Boating, 1874, for ease of understanding, half aunt, half boat. In 1874, Manet spent the summer in Gennevilliers, often spending time with Monet at Renoir, where the painting Boating was painted. In addition to adopting the lighter strokes and palette of his younger Impressionist colleagues, Manet used the broad planes of color and strong diagonals of Japanese prints to give unique form to this outdoor recreation scene. Everything in Manet's painting is disrupted. The woman's sex is cropped, the boat is cropped, the left half of the painting is clearly overloaded, and the heroes of the painting are busy each doing his own thing. There is no dialogue between them, a journey of two introverts. Trying with all his might to achieve recognition of the Salon, not as an outcast, Salon of the Outcasts 1863, but as an equal among equals, he writes a biblical plot and is subjected to even greater ridicule. Dead Christ with Angels, 1864. On white crumpled sheets in the center of the painting, we see the lifeless body of the Son of God. His gaze has faded, but his face has not lost its determination and nobility. The two angels at the sides of the protagonist are devoid of any attributes indicating heavenly affiliation. No light, no halo. They can be confused with ordinary people who came to the body of the Savior. We expect to see Mary Magdalene near an empty tomb. However, we see the dead Christ surrounded by two angels. Only when the painting was in the Salon, the artist noticed that he depicted the wounds of Christ on the other side. Critics, of course, did not hold back in their angry assessments. The canvas was accused of soullessness, pointing out the errors and illiteracy of its author. The cruelest reproach was that Christ in Manet's painting is more like a dead miner, with a particular realism of the corpse body. It has come down to us that Manet himself lamented his gross inaccuracy. But if we remember that Manet was one of the most educated representatives of the workshop, I think we can consider the painting as another trolling of the academicians. And another trolling according to the Salon academics, a young lady in 1866. Manet's model, Victorine Morin, recently posed as a saucy nude in the paintings Olympia and Breakfast on the Grass, both at the Musée d'Orsay, Paris. Here, looking relatively modest, she flaunts an intimate silk robe. At the Paris Salon of 1868, the realism of the work and the inclusion of a parrot were reminiscent of Gustave Courbet's Woman with a Parrot of 1866, which caused a scandal at that year's Salon. Manet's work was similarly criticized, and the public began referring to it as the Lady with a Parrot, although it was exhibited as the Lady in Pink and then as the Young Lady or the Young Lady in 1866. Recent scholars have interpreted it as an allegory of the five senses: the bouquet of flowers, smell; the orange, taste; the parrot's trusty face, hearing; and the man's monocle she holds, sight and touch. But let's get more serious. The bouquet in the girl's hand is recognizably violet. Violets in the symbolism of art associate modesty. Very much to argue with the orange, it is clearly a lemon in the tradition of the old masters, half peeled. Lemons were a very expensive and popular product in the old days. Sour and bitter products symbolize deceptive attractiveness or the attraction of earthly pleasures. Peeled lemons indicate duplicity. And what is the duplicity of a sweet, modest girl? We see a parrot symbolizing a man, and when combined with a lemon, he is most likely a lover. Glasses and monocles appear in the paintings of late medieval artists. This symbolized education and status of a person, an essential attribute of high position in society and close scrutiny of the enemies of faith, if their owner is a church minister. But in the Middle Ages, there was another metaphor associated with glasses, a symbol of delusion, the effect of blindness, spiritual or physical. And this is another trolling of academics and viewers. And so, Edouard Manet, unaware of his historical mission, led the Manet gang, from which grew a new style of painting of the 19th century, Impressionism. In 1862, Édouard Manet and Edgar Degas met in the halls of the Louvre. Legend has it that the artists met while copying Diego Velázquez's portrait of the Infanta Maria Teresa. And since then, their creative paths have constantly crossed. Degas is perhaps the most classical of the Impressionists. He studied at the École des Beaux-Arts under one of the pupils of the renowned painter Ingres, an admirer of the art of antiquity and classical painting in general. The classical school and new trends in art made up the fame of the beautiful artist. Edgar Degas, in all his favorite subjects, wrote first of all movement, washing women, jockeys before the start. His heroes are warming up, combing their hair, and fixing their hairstyles. The ballerinas are busy with their lives and do not suspect that they are being watched. That said, he was known for his perfectionism. Friends joked that the only way to get Degas to finish a painting was to take it away. He constantly repainted, adding new details to his works, stole and bought back already sold and donated canvases, achieving even more precise movements, even more natural poses, even more perfection. But we will begin to look at the artist's vast collection of works, again with the effect of framing. Woman Seated Near a Vase of Flowers, 1865. The juxtaposition of the prominent bouquet and the off-center figure gazing absent-mindedly to the right illustrates Degas' goal of capturing people in seemingly random, detached glances. Following his father's recommendation, the artist concentrated on portrait painting. It was this genre that Degas thought would bring the young artist fame and money. Collector of engravings from 1866, the depiction of people interrupting to perform tasks in a setting that reveals clues about their character was developed by Degas in numerous figure paintings of the 1860s and early 1870s. Nor did the artist pass by symbolism. Before us, Young Woman with Ibis, 1857-58, revised 1860-62. Degas sketched this composition in a notebook he used during his second stay in Rome in 1857-1858. Originally conceived as a depiction of a pensive woman, the painting took an enigmatic appearance when Degas added an imaginary Middle Eastern cityscape, pink flowers, and two red ibises around 1860-1862. In biblical tradition, the ibis is a symbol of carnal desire, impurity, and sloth. Early Christian texts and medieval bestiary notes that the ibis cannot swim and therefore devours dead fish near the shore. The latter he brings as food for his cubs, as if ibises are those carnivorous thinking people that greedily consume deadly fruits of deeds as food, and also feed their children to the ruin and destruction with them. On to Kircher. Worst of all is this ibis, from sinners the shoots are sinful. Physiologus. Ballet was his true passion. Degas, 20 years in a row, bought a season ticket to the theater, and only after 15 years, the director of the Paris Opera allowed him to write backstage and at rehearsals. Before that, the artist invited dancers to his studio, and sometimes just watched them without making a single sketch. Dance Classroom. 1870. This is Degas' first depiction of a dance class. Since the artist did not have the right to go backstage at the Paris Opera, his models came to his studio to pose. These sessions produced many large sketches, which Degas later adapted for other compositions. In the late 1870s, he explained, "I painted so many of these dance examinations without seeing them that I am a little ashamed of it." And there is another painting with this title. Dance Class, 1874. This work and its version in the Musée d'Orsay in Paris represent Degas' most ambitious paintings on the subject of dance. About 24 women, ballerinas, and their mothers wait while a dancer performs a pose before an exam. The class is taught by Jules Perrault, a renowned ballet master. The imaginary scene takes place in the rehearsal room of the old Paris Opera House, which has recently burned to the ground. On the wall next to the mirror hangs a poster for Rossini's Guillaume Tell, dedicated to the singer Jean-Baptiste Fauré, who commissioned the painting and provided it for the 1876 Impressionist exhibition. They call me a painter of dancers. They don't realize that the dancers served me only as a pretext to paint beautiful fabrics and convey movement. At times, female sitters thought Degas was crazy when he asked them to simply walk around the studio and comb their hair without sketching. As the last Impressionist exhibition in 1886, Degas presented a unique cycle of pastels with women bathing, wiping their bodies and combing their hair. By then, he had become a recognized, expensive, sought-after perfectionist painter. The artist began to go blind and switch from oil to pastels. Pastels are crayons that create a very unreliable and short-lived layer on the surface of cardboard or canvas, and when fixed, the colors fade considerably. And that's why many of the artist's brilliant paintings can be seen only once every few years, at special exhibitions. Degas experimented, kept pastels over steam, and invented new ways of painting. Woman Brushing Her Hair, 1888 to 90. This is the second of two versions of a composition Degas created around 1885. State Hermitage Museum, St. Petersburg. In this version, he used a new technique, applying pastel in so many successive layers that the pigment became polished and the paper underneath was rubbed to the point where fibers loosened and now protruded from the surface, like a multitude of small hairs. Perhaps he was trying to get an effect comparable to Renoir's work. Degas also emphasized unnatural greenish-yellow and green colors in modeling the pink flesh of the figure, perhaps inspired by the play of complementary color contrasts in the works of younger contemporaries, such as Seurat or Van Gogh. Self-taught in sculpture, Degas created many wax models on wire armatures. Subjects such as dancers, bathing women, and horses are also present in his paintings. But the sculptural studies are not preparations for specific oil canvases, but are independent explorations of three-dimensional forms. Wax is not the most durable material. The works were found already after the artist's death in the basement. Modern museums hold bronze copies of his wax sculptural studies, depicting horses and dancers. After Degas' death in 1917, more than 150 figurative sculptures were found in his studio. Most of them were made of fragile wax, clay, and plasticine, a modeling material based on wax and oil. The condition of many has deteriorated. Only a few have survived in copies cast from them in plaster. With the exception of the wax little 14-year-old dancer, Washington, and G.A., none of these sculptures were publicly exhibited during the artist's lifetime. Although Degas did not prefer to reproduce his sculptures in more durable materials, his heirs allowed copies to be cast in bronze in order to preserve the compositions and sell them as finished works. Paul Albert Bartolome, sculptor and longtime friend of Degas, prepared the 72 figures for casting by a prominent Parisian foundryman. The quality of Degas' bronzes were strictly controlled and their production was limited. A total of 22 issues of the series of 72 figures were cast. Each bronze in the series was assigned a number from 1 to 72. The series of 72 bronzes was completed before May 1921, when it was exhibited in Paris. The first edition, including the best works, was reserved for an important impressionist collector, Mrs. H.O. Avmeyer. She later acquired the first bronze copy of The Little 14-Year-Old Dancer, which was not included in the original series. In 1929, Mrs. Avmeyer bequeathed The Little 14-Year-Old Dancer and 70 of Degas' 72 bronze figurines to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The Little 14-Year-Old Dancer. A wealthy and enterprising collector's interest in the Little 14-Year-Old Dancer began when she first saw a wax model of this sculpture exhibited at the Paris Salon in 1881. The only work he ever exhibited in public was a wax version of the Little 14-Year-Old Dancer, National Gallery of Art, Washington, D.C. Degas decided to make the sculpture in tinted wax with real fabric, tulle, and ribbon, and the result reminded many viewers of the exhibit at Madame Tussauds Wax Museum in London. The glass display case in which it was shown at the Salon also recalled the wax mannequins in the costume show at the Paris World's Fair in 1879. Paris could barely keep its balance. Degas became the hero of the hour. His name was on everyone's lips. His statue was discussed by everyone. Much has been written about the origins of the Little 14-Year-Old Dancer and its importance in the history of modern sculpture. Memories of Mrs. Avmeyer about the sculpture. For some, it was a revelation. For others, a mystery. The graceful figure was as classical as an Egyptian statue and as modern as Degas. Degas' model was the young Marie van Gotham, a student at the School of Dance and by 1880 a professional dancer at the Paris Opera. In bronze, his model adopted the classic ballet stance. The right leg is forward and turned, and yet there is a deliberate awkwardness in the pose, in the uncompromising way that the arms are drooped back and the head is thrown back. However, the facial features of this precocious teenager are far from beautiful. The Little 14-Year-Old Dancer instantly became an icon in the history of sculpture, out of 73 bronze sculptures.